And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. And we are 1 day away from the Buffalo Bills home opener versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Thank you all so much for being here today, as I am joined by James Stokes and David Fox to discuss this upcoming matchup. Grab a morning cup of coffee, maybe some pancakes, whatever breakfast food you enjoy. And if it's maybe a little later for you, if you happen to be watching on the other side of the world, then grab whatever it is that would be a fitting meal for this time. Appreciate you all being here. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And one more time, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. And joining me today, as always, is a stacked panel of guests. Our first guest today, you know him very well from other Cover One shows, including The Roundup, as well as his post-game articles, which recently, unfortunately, have been filled with woe. David Fox, how you doing today?
We're doing. I'm house sitting for a friend of mine. Right now, the dog is calm and satiated. She's staring right at me right now. But everything, we're doing good right now. Just hoping for a much better week next week for the Bills.
As am I. And funny enough, it's kind of a swap. I guess you could call it a show swap because, David, I'm going to be sitting in on Monday and you're here today. So it's like almost this perfect like reverse Uno card thing we got going on. Stokes, welcome to the show for the very first time ever. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to be here. It's I followed you guys for quite a bit, and it's really exciting to be here with you guys.
We're excited to have you, man, and really appreciate both of you taking time on a Saturday to talk some Bills football. Obviously, not the result you wanted. That's putting it very nicely for Monday's game, but we move onward to Vegas. But in order to look ahead, we do, unfortunately, to the dismay of many, have to look at the past to learn from it. And that past was ugly, guys. I mean, that Bills game was just something that felt like, I don't want to say uncharacteristic because they play the Jets very closely to their level each time they play them. The Jets defense is excellent, but it was disappointing, especially when Aaron Rodgers goes down to start the year. So, David, then we'll go to you, Stokes. Just give me your final thoughts on that game looking ahead to the next game.
I mean, when Rodgers got hurt, it was like, oh, wow. Really? Like he's gonna get hurt on the fourth play, and then because it wasn't such they didn't bring the card out immediately. He walks off the field, so you kind of felt like, okay, well, knowing Rodgers, he'll get some sort of shot or do some ayahuasca in the back when no one's looking, and he'll come right back out and he'll do what he needs to do. And then they bring the card out. Then they say they're gonna do X-rays. And then they say the X-rays are negative. But he's also out. It was like, oh, so they think it's something else and something else that's bad. And so when you tell me that for 3.5 quarters, you're going to get Zach Wilson and Nate Hackett against this Bills defense, I'm like, all right, easy win. Good way to start the year, and then the rest happens and you just kind of want to destroy everything that you see in life. It was just brutal seeing how many times it was a difficult game to process because you felt like they were doing exactly what they needed to do to just get the win in week one, right? They were staying patient on offense. They were doing a good job on defense. And then just a couple of plays, and that's really all it takes in the NFL. It's just a couple of bad plays at bad times to throw everything against you. You saw it just a couple of nights ago with the Vikings, right? Almost a very similar game, quite frankly, in terms of the Vikings played really well against a very good team. They're on the road. They have a chance to win this game a couple different times, and they just fumble the ball 4 different times throughout that game. That's all it takes sometimes. Just a couple of these plays to just go against your way at the wrong time, and that's it happened to the Vikings, it happened to the Bills. But that also proves that like this is not just a Bills thing, even though I'm sure Bills fans kind of feel like sometimes it's just a Bills thing. This is what happens in the NFL when you don't take care of the football, when you keep giving teams opportunities to take advantage of your mistakes. At a certain point, they're going to do it. And moving forward, like the Bills are not going to have a chance to keep it close in other games, right? Like they went into overtime because they had it. They kept the Jets to 16 points despite 4 turnovers because they have Zach Wilson and Nate Hackett. Like every team has that combination of crappy quarterback and crappy play caller. The other teams are going to take much greater advantage of that. So,
yeah, Stokes, what do you think?
I think this was one of those games where you just had to adhere to the fact that this is the Josh Allen experience on offense. Like sometimes there are going to be those games. There's moments where he's just going to go a little bit off the rails, and that happened on multiple plays throughout this game. It felt like he was playing the game with the sense that if he didn't go out and get every single yard on every single play, someone in the background was going to hurt someone he loves. Like that's how it felt because he's trying to jump over people when he didn't need to. He was trying to throw deep when he didn't always need to. It was one of those situations where it was uncharacteristic and characteristic because there are times when Josh reels it in, and then there are the times where he just goes a little bit off, and that happens more often than not in games where he feels that he's got to be the guy, and that maybe that's just part of the mentality that they have instilled into him, or that's just his mentality. But I felt like the defense kept the Bills in the game. I mean, along with Zach Wilson because he wasn't the guy that they were preparing for. But it was one of those situations where you just watch this game, and as it's unfolding, you're like, we're gonna lose, aren't we? We're gonna lose this one, right? And slowly but surely, they kept eking back into the game, and we just never did anything that was going to put the Jets in a situation where they had to chase and they couldn't come back from it. And it was really, really, really difficult to watch. I'm hoping it seems like the Bills have one or two of those games each season over the last few, and I'm just hopeful that this was the one that got that out of the way, and just burn the tape as much as you can, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like that optimism. I share that sentiment. At least I try to share that sentiment of get it out of the way. You played really ugly football to start, but unfortunately, it was at a time where I felt like, even though it's week 1, and I'm a huge believer that week 1, like many people, isn't indicative of a full season's worth of work, that it's something that's deceptive. It's not a week where you should be playing your best ball, should be showing everything, and it's very possible that you could come out of the gates sloppy. The Bills did this in 2021 against the Steelers. But where I have a problem is the circumstance surrounding this loss, right? So when it comes to the Jets, we knew that if Rodgers was healthy, that defense was going to be tough. They have a lot of potential to be a very, very good team, maybe even elite team down the stretch. Huge game, but if you it's not that you want to lose it, but if you do, you kind of understand why, and you have a baseline to kind of go off of for when you see them again in November. But this time, Aaron Rodgers goes down, and wish him all the best. A terrible injury, very unfortunate, not something you ever want to see, especially for a Hall of Fame quarterback. But he gets hurt. Zach Wilson comes in, and I'm watching this game, and all I could say is it's deja vu from last year in MetLife. And maybe you could take away from that they have a tough time playing there. They have a tough time playing the Jets. There's a team that has their number, and it's them. And I would agree with that, but you had an opportunity to win this game. You had multiple drives that, while we'll talk about Ken Dorsey in more detail when we get to our matchup preview, I thought game plan wise performed well. Gave Josh Allen the opportunity to set the table against a tough defense and to make things more manageable for him. Where I'm extremely disappointed is the fact that Josh Allen had, in year 6, one of the most absurd mental regressions ever. And Stokes, like you said, this is the Josh Allen experience, but I also don't think that it's something that we could just shy away from and like say, well, he'll bounce back. And I don't mean that he won't. but he needs to be held accountable for these types of bad decisions in spots where they weren't necessary. Especially, I mean, if you want to look and go back and watch the tape at 2 of those interceptions, they did not need to happen. And there was an alternative for each play. You could have ran, gotten a first down. On the second interception to Diggs, you could have just simply thrown the ball away, gotten it out, just lived to fight another play. It's disappointing. I'm disappointed in his performance, but I'm not out on him, and I don't think anyone should be. I think that'd be ridiculous. So, Stokes, back to you, and then we'll go back to David. But any one last final thought on this game before we move on and close the book?
I echo a lot of the sentiments that you made in regarding Josh Allen, like having accountability, and it seems like at every turn, like whenever he's meeting people, he talks about how he's accountable. He's accountable. I made mistakes. I caused the team to lose this game. All these types of things. But then it's like, well, in 5 games we're going to see the same thing. And when you see that on interceptions, there are guys open for actual first down yardage. When you can just take that, it's just what part of the issue is processing, or whether it's Ken in his ear saying, "Hey, we're gonna call this shot, but seriously, if you see the first down, go ahead and take that." And that's what we don't know for sure what's missing there, whether it's processing or he's not getting the proper talking to, I guess, before the play is called.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, David?
I think that you can't change what happened on Monday night. You gotta get yourself back together and get ready for the Raiders. And if there's a team that I'd want to face directly after a devastating and terrible, embarrassing loss, probably be the Raiders in Buffalo. That's a nice potential palate cleanser, which is not to say that the Raiders are going to be some sort of pushover or whatever, but they're an easier team to face than the Jets, I think, will be.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And this is a good comment from Pops Mafia here. We got to stop to find a way to lose mentality and find a way to win. Understand the game you are in and do what it takes to win. And I agree. And that's, it sounds kind of like simple. And I think when you really assess the Bills, this is what you got to say, because that's a game where you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. That's just unacceptable play. And there's really no way to sugarcoat it. When you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, the only thing stopping him is himself. He is his own worst enemy. And I just hope that for something like this, a loss like that, it's humbling enough for him to kind of carry himself forward and just work hard to prevent those mistakes from happening, because it's not like, it's not like it's something that I guess you could argue with the third pick. He made a throw that he's made before. Whitehead had a good play on the ball. You could argue Davis's route wasn't fully crisp, and that's what led to a pick. Like, there's just 2 egregious decisions that just need to be better in the future. And I want to address this real quick. So Trey Williams here. Joe, I hear Bills fans are impressed with James Cook, but can you speak to his results? 3.8 yards per carry against light boxes, while in 56% 12 personnel, which was number 1 in the league. Then RJ actually followed it up with this comment, and it kind of takes the words away from me a bit. But yes, you got to understand the Jets D-line is one of the best in football, and they have debatably the best, if not a top 3 D tackle in Quinnen Williams. Where you run on the field matters, and their outside runs were successful. They had a chain of, I think it was 3 straight runs with James Cook that went for over 10 yards a pop. And also, if you look at the flip side, Breece Hall had an explosive run. They also held the Jets rushing offense to 3.3 yards per carry. So you could say like you want to see more out of Cook when it comes to running up the middle, but I think that's a matchup issue. And I think, yes, you shouldn't be trying to attack, the A gap when you have to deal with really good defensive line play. But these outside runs are what you got to lean on. But also, if you lean on them too much, you might run into trouble. So I still like the way James Cook played. I'm not out or disappointed or anything. I just think that defense is stubborn. And this is the byproduct of both an offensive coordinator that should recognize when the right time to run up the middle is, like not on 2nd and 15 when Quinnen Williams is in the game at OT, and also understanding what you can get away with, which outside runs they did. So, gentlemen, let's move on. It's time to close the book on this, and we are going to look ahead to the Vegas Raiders. Now, I want to ask, and I'll start with you, David. What do you look to just see from the Vegas Raiders? Like, what is it you're expecting them to throw at the Bills, both offensively and defensively?
So I think you're going to expect a healthy dose of Josh Jacobs. I mean, he was the leading rusher for the NFL last year. Is a very, very good player. And now that we got the report yesterday that Jacoby Myers is going to be out with a concussion, and he's the one who scored both of their touchdowns last week against the Broncos, it's going to be the Devontae Adams show. And it very well should be, because Devontae Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But I think that it really, what you're going to expect from the Raiders is nothing all that surprising. I think, Josh McDaniels may not be everyone's favorite head coach for a number of perfectly legitimate reasons, but I do think that he's a smart person in terms of offensive scheming and offensive play calling. I think that he knows that he's got to get the ball into Devontae's hands, into Josh Jacobs' hands. It's got to run through them. If they have a chance in this game, it's going to be to try and limit their possession. So I would expect them to lean on Josh Jacobs a bit more than trying to get Jimmy G to throw to Devontae Adams a bunch. I think that if they want, this Bills defense is great and it played very well against the Jets. But I do think that if there's a weakness to this team, is that they're not like some great run defense, which is fine. It's the year of our Lord 2023. I don't really care that much about run defense. It's a pass first league. But, if you think you can do that successfully for 4 quarters, I mean, sure, fine, give it a shot. But I also think that the Bills are not exactly slouches on run defense either. And if they continuously try to run the ball, I don't think it's going to find quite the same level of success as they are hoping it will. That being said, I mean, Josh Jacobs is a really, really good running back and can create plays on his own. And I think that they're going to have to do a really good job of tackling him, trying to force him to make as many plays on his own as they can. Right? Like, you can't just sort of give them free yards. You have to just maintain that gap integrity. You have to be able to make a couple tackles in the open field if you can. Just try and make the Raiders as one-dimensional as possible. Because if it comes down to, getting them into a situation where they have to throw, where, maybe you're up multiple scores, then I think that you're in a really good position against this team.
I agree. Stokes, what do you think?
I think that I would expect the Raiders offensively to do things similarly to when the Titans have played the Bills well in the past, when they had Derrick Henry and AJ Brown. They run them, and then the play action cross seemed to be always open with AJ Brown from Ryan Tannehill. And I feel like that's something that they could try to use, because if the run defense isn't working very well, which, I mean, we had good moments in stopping the Jets, but there were also those gash plays. And I don't think that Josh Jacobs is the type of speedster that Breece Hall is. So maybe it'll be a little bit different. Maybe it won't be a 30-yard run. It'll be a 15-yard run. But still, in the end, it's still a 15-yard run. And we've got to account for that. And, whatever they have to do, whether it's gap assignments that they have to make sure they're adhering to, or not making too many gambles when you're trying to shoot gaps against a team that is run first or run based. That's what I'm expecting them to do, is try and establish Josh Jacobs, because why wouldn't you? He's a great running back. And then just I think they're just going to trust their best players. If they don't have the number 2 wide receiver that they can trust like they had this past week, if you have a top 5 guy at 2 positions, trust those guys. I mean, and when you have a good play caller in Josh McDaniels, that's something that you want to take focus on. And as far as defense goes, I imagine that they're going to try their best to do what they do is just let Max Crosby do what he does. He's a great pass rusher. Their secondary is going to be a different situation than the Jets. This is not the Jets secondary. So they're probably going to have to do a couple different things and to try to disrupt Josh Allen, his timing, and everyone else's timing. So I would expect them defensively to probably do a little bit more exotic things as far as blitzes or different types of packages to not leave their corners on as much of an island as the Jets might be able to, because they don't have those guys.
Mhm. Yeah, great points, guys. And I'll start for the Bills defense. Again, that is how I agree, Stokes. I could see a similar game plan to what Tennessee has done in the past. When you have Josh Jacobs and you have Devontae Adams, you have to use your best players, especially when you lose Jacoby Myers for the week. And you know that that kind of security option is that you relied heavily on in week one is no longer there, at least for this week. And Hunter Renfrow didn't get an insane share. I don't remember what his snap count was, but I do remember it was a very low, kind of disappointing production for someone that they've leaned on in the past. Their rookie tight end had no receptions, I know, because he's my fantasy tight end. So good job, Michael Mayer. But when it comes to their offense, yeah, ground and pound is the name of the game for them. I mean, you have to lean on your talent. Josh Jacobs is a phenomenal running back. They ran a lot of 21, a lot of 22, a lot of 20 last week. They were not highest, but one of the highest teams in the league last week when it came to how often they were in that personnel. So it shows you how much they want to lean on the run. But where I think you can win this is I trust the coverage. I trust the opportunity to kind of bracket cover a Devontae Adams when you know you don't have to deal with Myers now. And I also trust that this team is going to stack the box a lot against the Raiders. I think you're going to see a lot of that and try to get the Raiders to sell out for it and get him out of those looks if you can shut Jacobs down. By doing so, you force Jimmy G into the bind of can Jimmy G's arm and can Jimmy G himself beat you? And that is a matchup I think the Bills want because I personally think Jimmy G is a perfectly fine quarterback in this league, but not someone of the degree of Mahomes or Joe Burrow or any of these emerging stud quarterbacks where I feel like they give you the hybrid ability of beating you with their arm, also their athleticism. So I could absolutely see the Bills running a lot of stack box and maybe even in those like third and long situations you get him in, sending pressure and just trying to see if they can rattle Jimmy G to make mistakes. Offensively, I see a similar game plan from the Bills than what they carried out for this versus the Jets. I mean, the bottom line is teams play Josh with too high. They like doing it. They want to make Josh make a mistake over the deep part of the field. I foresee that Ken Dorsey is going to try and create some shortcut options for Josh, try to get him to limit his mistakes. Essentially, here's your second chance to run this game plan we had against the Raiders, or I'm sorry, had against the Jets against the Raiders, but with this time having a little more opportunity to create more yards after catch with your tight ends, really just gaining the ability to exploit the matchups that your tight ends can create, as well as some of your other receivers in space, and maybe the opportunity to get people a little more involved as a result. I think if you do that, you're going to be in great shape. And I think the Bills have an excellent opportunity to kind of showcase that what they were trying to pull off against the Jets, assuming that Josh doesn't turn anything over. So Stokes, I'm going to go back to you, then back to David. But any other thoughts on this matchup, things you want to see, things that you're really just kind of looking forward to in this week?
So I'm looking forward to continuing to see how Dalton Kincaid is going to be used. He was really, really fun to watch on Monday. Every time he got the ball, he was trying to hurt somebody, and that's what you love to see out of rookies and at the tight end position. You don't know how long it's going to be that way, but it seemed like every time he got a look, he was trying to run somebody over. And that's what you want to see out of your tight end. Not so much out of your quarterback, but out of your tight end, you want to see that. And as you mentioned, I'm hopeful that they'll just try to do a lot more short stuff. And hopefully that's just not, as you said, Josh Allen doesn't go haywire and try to do something special.
What do you think, David?
You know, I'm just interested in seeing. Again, Kincaid is a great thing to talk about, just because the Raiders don't really have a great group of linebackers, and I think that's a very easy mismatch just right off the bat. But I also am for a similar reason, looking at what they're going to do with this run game, because I think they did find a good amount of success in the run game last week against the Jets. And that's a really good sign, in my opinion, because, again, that's a great defense to be able to run against. And I think the Raiders defense is obviously not at the same level as the Jets are and not as well coached. But I do think that they are, a good team, especially up front, even without Chandler Jones. Like you said, Max Crosby is still somebody. Like Jonathan Hankins is still there, if I remember correctly. And I think that they have some good players, but it's going to be good to see how they want to establish this run game early, because it was obvious that they wanted to continuously try to lean on the run game a little bit more against the Jets. And then they just sort of got discombobulated in the second half because of the turnovers and being so out of sync. And I think that you'll see a bit more success in the run game and a few more explosive runs from James Cook this week. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yes, I agree. I think James Cook is poised to have a big game. I'll get to that in a second, but real quick, our friends from Bills Chat are watching, and they say Raiders had the second lowest DADOT or DADOT last season. If Allen can be patient, though, they should be able to pick them apart underneath. I agree, and that's going to tie into one of my biggest points here is, like you both said, and it might seem like a low-hanging fruit, but the point is Dalton Kincaid. If you watch last week, you could see how many times he was getting open on the field, especially on the third pick. That's probably the one I'll point to every single week until I feel more comfortable about Josh Allen's play, is that he's getting himself open, and he's getting himself open in tight spaces on tight coverage. But also, when the ball is in his hands, he is capable of creating yards after catch and actually being physical enough to drive things forward even further. There was one specific play, I believe it was a screen, where he got the ball about, I think it was a first down, and there was contact involved. He can get through defenders, and he's a big body. He's a tight end. I know he is not a true, how do I describe it? Like, he is not like a Lee Smith type of tight end, right? He's a hybrid pass catching guy, but he has all the ability to create these opportunities with the ball in his hands and be physical enough to get himself first downs, to get himself really a big rapport in this offense. I want to see Josh trust it. I think the thing, too, is when we talk about a conservative game plan, you got to remember, too, with Josh Allen, and a problem I have with him sometimes is his mentality can be that of a true overly aggressive alpha type of quarterback. And that does work from time to time, but also it gets into trouble, like you've alluded to before, both of you. And I think if you can just play a patient game and understand that these teams are now trying to bait you into mistakes and just pick them apart, nice and casually, you'll be fine, because you have the playmakers that are able to just get yards after catch, make things work for you, be a more efficient offense. And most importantly, if you can just set the table on early downs, which was a huge problem in this past game, then I believe that you are going to have a lot of success. And on the defensive side of the ball, there's been talk about the interior D-line. That's something that I think every week I'm going to look forward to. But really, I'm excited to watch how our secondary handles Devontae Adams, because Stokes, when you were talking about how the Titans match up with the Raiders, or I'm sorry, how the Titans match up against the Bills and kind of how the Raiders could do something similar, I want to see Benford along with Trey White, but specifically Benford, since Zach Wilson was the quarterback he was up against last week, show us what he's got in pass coverage. I have full confidence that he's going to be able to actually, put the clamps on whatever receiver he covers. He's very physical, but he also plays zone really well. I want to see what he's got. But I have a thought on a concerning matchup, but I'm going to save that. And David, I'm going to pass it to you. We're talking about things we like to see, but what are we concerned about in this game to boot?
I mean, it's really just their best players, right? I mean, it's Devontae Adams and it's Max Crosby. And I would say I'm more concerned about Max Crosby because he's going up against Spencer Brown more likely and more often than not. And that's about as big a mismatch as I could possibly imagine. If there's a player in the NFL that might actually be underrated in terms of his skill set and his production and his ability to be a game wrecker, to what his actual recognition is to like mainstream NFL people, it's probably Max Crosby. This dude is a menace and is just a phenomenal player. And I feel like he doesn't get talked about in that upper echelon of pass rushers and defensive ends like a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett. And I think that he's probably right up there with those types of guys. He's just a great, great player. And, it's interesting because, like, he came into the NFL as a fourth-round pick. He was, like, this sort of underweight defensive end that didn't seem like he was going to be anything more than, like, a, rotational type of pass rusher. And he's turned into something far, far greater than that. And I think that the Bills have to 100% key in onto him, whether that's adding extra blockers to help out Spencer Brown or whatever it is. Like, they have to be able to limit what he can do to stop the Bills offense. And players like that are going to get their plays, right? Like Quinnen Williams, Aaron Donald, Max Crosby, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett. These are the types of guys where you're just trying to limit what they can do to hurt your team. You can't stop them entirely. That's not how this works. But you have to be able to limit what they're able to do. Otherwise, you're going to be in a bad position on most downs.
Mm-hmm. What you think, Stokes?
So my biggest concern, I think, is the Raiders being potentially methodical. So if they have 2 or 3 10, 12 play drives where they're taking 7 minutes off the clock, that's going to put pressure on Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey, like whether it's consciously or not. That, like, when you're running out of time and you're expecting to score a bunch of points, if you're getting the ball back, if it's 15 minutes or so real time between you touching the ball, you're going to have a lot more. They're going to be a little bit more antsy. They're going to try and get those points back if the Raiders were to score a touchdown, something like that. The 7-minute, 8-minute drives. It's one of those situations where I feel like they may try too hard to try and get those points back if they're either behind or chasing when you end up making those bigger mistakes. And that's how it can compound and snowball. And that's my biggest concern because with Josh Jacobs, if they go 3 yards on first down, 4 yards on second down, and then we got to try and stop them on third down, it's third and short. Then we have to worry about Josh Jacobs and the quick pass to Devontae Adams, and that's how those drives can become long and methodical, and that's where it could be concerning to me because it has a larger effect on the rest of the team on the other side as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, and something I didn't even think of. But when you talk about Allen and you talk about how the mental part of his game is one that can overcompensate, that's a great thing to point out because, yeah, if the Raiders are bleeding time off the clock and they're actually having success and Jimmy G isn't getting off the field, but he's hitting these quick hits and getting that receiver over the middle, and they're exploiting the fact that we're kind of selling out for the run if we do choose to do so, that could create a lot of pressure on Allen. I think this is a matchup where you will actually see them. While I think the game plan is still going to be primarily like a left to right, time passes, screens, underneath stuff to try and get yards after catch, you still have Stephon Diggs. You still have Gabe Davis. You still have these vertical options that I do think you can have success airing the ball out, assuming that you could scheme a route that can just split defenders, maybe get something up the seam that gets you, at least to the goal line, and you can make your way with that. But yeah, when we talk about the Raiders, you have to talk about Max Crosby. I mean, he is a force, one of the best defensive ends in the league, simultaneously underrated, as Ant pointed out, but also an elite caliber guy who's going to get pressure, who's going to make Spencer Brown's life hell. And I don't even think, feelings of Spencer Brown aside, I don't even think that's a knock on him. I think Crosby is just that good. But I do think that with this game plan you have from Dorsey potentially being something that I alluded to before, and they were doing this against the Jets, you really are not trying to keep the ball in Allen's hands. You want to get it out quickly. You want to make sure that there's no pass rush pressure from the right side. I imagine that they're not going to really look his way often, but if you can just avoid the pass rush presence until you can kind of bait them into a situation where maybe you're not sending a lot of pressure, or maybe Brown's able to pass Crosby off to Torrance, who I feel like could just hold him for a few seconds while Brown picks up someone else from the interior if they do decide to run a stunt, then I think you'll be all right. But you do still have to acknowledge his presence on the field. And David, I love the point about you can't contain them. You can only you can't stop them. You can only contain them. You can't really expect them to not do anything, because that's why they're the best of the best. And one way or another, when you're talking about a game where a defensive end has forward momentum on an offensive lineman, he's going to break through at some point. And I think it's just about how you're able to attack that, understand where it's coming from. And I feel like Dorsey, while we have our criticisms of him, I don't believe that he's dumb enough to just let Crosby have his way. I think Allen will have some deep shots in this game, but I don't think it's going to be constant enough where we have to worry about Brown holding up in long-term pass protection. But another thing that I'll say I'm concerned about, and then I'll ask you guys, your thoughts on this matchup specifically, because I want to key in on someone who's being mentioned in the chat. Terrell Bernard. So when we talk about this potential matchup in the middle of the field, right? So we're talking about maybe they run on early downs. Maybe there's early down success with Josh Jacobs because he's a very good back. And then Jimmy G tries to attack the middle of the field. Where do you stand on your thoughts of Terrell Bernard in coverage? Because I thought he played a pretty good game against the Jets. But again, the degree of testing there is kind of hard to say with Zach Wilson versus Jimmy G, who's, I think, an upgrade. Stokes, I'll start with you, but just what are your thoughts on Terrell Bernard in this game and his matchup against the Raiders offense?
So when I watched him on Monday, I didn't feel as if I could pinpoint a bunch of plays where it's like, well, he did the worst thing on that play to cause this to be a negative play. So I don't think that he did anything to make it seem like he's the first person to lose his spot if there were another option involved. I felt like he played well enough. He made some stops. I mean, he did sometimes the Trey Edmonds thing where he makes a tackle 11 yards down the field. Like, oh, great, thank you. I would have preferred you to get the tackle a little bit earlier, but he was enough. He played well enough to give him more time playing because he didn't get an opportunity to play in the preseason. So he's like so many of these guys as well. You know, if you don't play a lot in the preseason, there's whatever amount of rust you want to associate all that with. And I felt like I was pleasantly surprised because I was worried that without having the security of knowing how the middle linebacker position was going to look, that it would look bad. But I think with enough good guys around you, you don't look terrible. And I didn't think he looked terrible.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, David?
I liked a lot of what I saw from Terrell Bernard, particularly in coverage. He just looked like especially like you brought up, that he didn't have most of training camp. He didn't have any of the preseason to work through. He looked like he knew what he was doing. He looked like he was comfortable in coverage. He didn't look like there were any like major defensive breakdowns, so he's getting guys in position because he's the one who's calling the defensive plays. I think that for having that be his first game as a starter was really good. Maybe a couple of missed tackles in the run game or whatever, but nothing too egregious in my mind. I think that Terrell Bernard has done more than enough to, I think, earn people's trust. Certainly the coach's trust. I mean, they're the ones who put him in this position. He seems to have succeeded so far. I think Bills fans are just kind of antsy when it comes to what they want out of this position, just because it felt like the Bills didn't do anything to improve this position. They just sort of said, well, we have Terrell Bernard and we'll draft Dorian Williams, but we're not going to make Dorian Williams a Mike linebacker. We'll have Terrell Bernard be a Mike linebacker, and we'll sign Christian Kirksey, but he's not going to be available week one, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's just this sort of anxiousness and antsiness that is causing Bills fans to not feel overly comfortable. And also just, I think a lot of it also comes from the fact that Bernard is, quote unquote, undersized for the position. And I think that comes from this sort of archaic understanding of like what linebackers look like nowadays. And it probably doesn't help that, the previous Bill linebacker was Tremaine Edmonds, who's 6'4", like 245. I mean, that's a man. That's a machine of a man.
That's a man.
That's what he is. But if you look at, one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL right now is Roquan Smith. He is, if I'm looking this up correctly, 6'1", 236. I mean, if you ask most people what a Mike linebacker is supposed to look like, that's probably not what they're thinking of, right? We just sort of have this older understanding of what a middle linebacker is or isn't supposed to look like. And it's not 2005 anymore. Not everybody is going to be Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs. That's not what we're looking for here. It's a modern NFL and it requires modern players. And not everybody has to beat blocks the same way either. Not every he's short, he can't stack and shed. It's like not everybody stacks and sheds. That's not the only way to do this. It's the same thing with tackling, right? We talk about you hear it all the time in broadcasts. It's great to see a perfect form tackle, right? It's fun, it's exciting, and it's a great hit 99% of the time. But also 95% of the time, you're not getting in position to make a perfect form tackle. It's not realistic. There are other ways of tackling. In fact, I think it was sometime last year, maybe even a little longer ago than that. Eric put out on Twitter this coaching clinic, or a clip from a coaching clinic that Mark D'Antonio did, where it just broke down like the different types of tackling that they teach when he was at Michigan State. And it's interesting because I think if you talk to other coaches, they would probably tell you the same sort of thing. It's like, you're not always going to be in position to make a perfect form tackle. So when you're in this position, this is what you should be trying to do. When you're coming from this angle, this is what you should be trying to do. And, we could talk about missed tackles as one thing, but the problem is with missed tackles is if you're missing a tackle and it's leading to a big play, it's partially on you for not making the tackle, obviously, but it's also a defensive thing as a whole because they're not in pursuit either. And so sometimes a missed tackle is okay because you have pursuit coming in right behind it to help make up for it. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that, then it's a whole thing. So it's tackling is a team thing. It's an individual thing. It's like anything else with football. It's an individual thing, but it's a team thing. It all comes together in the end.
Yeah. And someone made a comment, I think it was Pops earlier. I'll try to find it, but it was about Bernard's. Here it is. Bernard's biggest weakness is what he does wearing the green dot, making sure everyone is lined up correctly. So I don't know if I agree with this. I think in principle or in practice, this makes sense. And I think you could say as a second year starting linebacker who has never started before because Tremaine Edmunds had this spot, he is going to go through growing pains being in this position for the first time, obviously inheriting a lot of roles that Edmunds had to leave behind. And now, calling plays, getting people lined up, making sure that everything is situated prior to snap. I don't think he did a bad job with it, but I also think when you deal with talented offenses, it doesn't matter who your linebacker is, because at some point, I can't say that. It does matter, but every linebacker is going to struggle if you're dealing with a high-flying offense that's just inherently difficult to stop, like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, teams that have great O-lines, teams that have great run blocking, pass blocking, teams that have great receivers. I think when it came to Bernard was in position a lot of the time. He had people in the right position a lot of the time. There were a couple of big runs, but again, David, it's multifaceted. I don't blame Bernard for Breece Hall's, 81-yard run? I blame a systemic problem where you had Trey White, who had the opportunity to make a stop and couldn't and slipped. And then Poyer took a very bad angle on the tackle, which obviously it's tough to do that, but you want to see that out of your veteran safety, be able to kind of get in position a little better for someone like Hall. And also, sometimes the team you play is just good. Sometimes the running back you face is just good. The first run of the game, Leonard Floyd, he was in position. He got chipped out of the way. And then Hall, who's being a fast, physical, slippery back, got through for a big run. Like, these types of things happen. And I think it kind of skews our perspective of running defense. And it's not to say that you don't want it buttoned up. I want it buttoned up. But I also think big runs are bad. But how the drive finishes as a result of these big runs is what matters more to me. In that game, neither of those runs led to anything more than 3 points, right? The 81-yard run, which Benford tracked down, was a field goal. Like, yeah, it sucks to put up 3, but I'd rather 3 than 7. The first big run, and yes, this has to do with Rodgers' injury, led to nothing. So I'm not mad at the way Terrell Bernard played. I'm not mad that, he's the starting middle linebacker. I think he earned it. And I also think that, David, I want to, kind of follow up the point you made too. And I know I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but Babbage talked about playing above your size. And I've said this multiple times on this show. We look at someone's measurements and we automatically assume that they're unfit for this position because Tremaine Edmunds was a freak size guy. To me, what matters is, again, playing above your size. If Terrell Bernard is getting in position in coverage, making plays on the ball, being where he needs to be pre-snap, and his assignment is carried out, I'm fine with it. And I think he could do that. And I think we should have some more faith in him. But one thing I do want to bring up, Stokes, I'm going to start with you on this one. A lot of people are bringing up the idea of Kirksey in our chat. And I want to just acknowledge everybody here because it's brought up multiple times. So one thing that Judge tweeted, was it this morning or yesterday? It was yesterday. He talked about how the Raiders offense is going to run at the Bills and it's going to be a big test and potentially bringing a third linebacker on the field. Do you anticipate that this is the week that Kirksey actually plays, or do you think he needs more time to learn the playbook?
I think that it'll depend. So if he's just going to be a cog in the machine, where it's like, hey, Terrell's going to tell him what to do, then he's going to do it. great. But I think if they're going to depend on him to make some of the line adjustments and line calls, I think he needs more time. If he's just going to be out there to fill a role, then yes, I could definitely see it. But since the fact that he's a veteran, like there probably isn't a whole lot of things defensively that he needs to learn that he hasn't been exposed to over his many years in the NFL. So it's just a matter of getting familiarity with what they're meaning when they say this, and that. That is the only gap that he's going to have to deal with. But I feel like if they're going to come out with 3 wide receivers, oftentimes I think it would be difficult for us to put 3 linebackers out there with the defensive line. So I would imagine they're going to start out trying to stop the run if they can with Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, see what those guys do, because Matt Milano, he plays sometimes like 2 line. Really, really, really good. So I would expect that Kirksey, he may get elevated, but I think it may be a break in case of emergency if the Bills are just getting gashed.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I think that I'm just surprised that coming out of this game there was this sort of talk about Bernard and like, well, is he really good enough? It's just like that wasn't my thought. I thought he was perfectly fine. Like I think there's, like I said, I think there's just a lot of impatience and anxiousness about what to expect from this position. And I think if you're, not making a big play like right off the bat, like Matt Milano tends to do, right? Or if you're not immediately just the worst player on the field, then people aren't really sure what to think. And so it just leads to, I don't know. And then you kind of keep forming the same opinions that you've had the entire offseason. But I think as the season goes on, people will probably see that Bernard will be a perfectly fine middle linebacker for this team. And, that is assuming that he stays healthy, right? Which has been the concern from him. Mm-hmm. He missed a lot of games in college due to health concerns, and obviously missed the whole preseason this year because of a hamstring injury. So, there's that concern, and if that happens, that's why you have Christian Kirksey, and that was a great signing for them to make when they did, and I still feel confident in either one of those players, regardless of what happens. So.
Yeah, I feel like they can trot Kirksey out on the field if they feel that they're comfortable with how much he's picked up on the playbook. And I think you'll see them, if they do activate him, have, parts of the field where it's going to be a 3 linebacker set. And you kind of just have Bernard in the middle, Kirksey manning the right side, and then you have Milano playing his traditional side. But I'm not sure if he's ready yet. Again, it's a recent signing. Like when it comes to someone like Kirksey, who's a vet in this league, I imagine he can pick up on a playbook quickly, but I also don't want to rush him out there if Bernard has been playing well. And it seems like there's a degree of separation from how people perceive Bernard as well as the Buffalo Bills running defense and how we're perceiving it. And that's not me trying to create any dispersions here, but I want people to understand, explosive runs, yes, they're terrible. I don't want them to happen. I don't like seeing Breece Hall gash up for 81 yards or 30 yards on the first play, whatever that run was. But I also look at the whole picture and how the team adjusted to him and how the team was able to kind of overcome those big plays. The Bills' rushing defense gave up 3.3 yards per carry. All right. So explosive runs are bad, but the explosive runs didn't lead to anything, and they bared it down in the most important parts of the game. Think to the final drive. I mean, those running plays were just, and I think David's got to come back, probably some Wi-Fi issues, but those running plays weren't going anywhere. They were clamping down on them. They were able to kind of sniff it out and make plays at the line of scrimmage, and that includes Christian Benford. That includes Terrell Bernard. I'm not excusing the fact that explosive runs have happened and that the rushing defense needs to clamp those down, especially when you go up against another difficult back. But I do see that after this whole game ended, the rushing defense isn't the reason that the Bills lost this game. The reason the Bills lost this game is a quarterback who continued to put them in disadvantageous positions. So again, running defense matters, and it's something that I do think is important, and I do think you got to keep your eyes on it. But I also think I look at the drive as a whole. Yeah, run the ball, drain the clock. But if you're kicking a field goal, that's putting no pressure on this offense, especially if Josh Allen cleans things up and actually is able to manipulate the defense the way he sees fit. So that's really my thoughts on the running defense as a whole. And I just, again, Terrell Bernard is not someone that I'm going to sit here and say, like, I looked at his performance and he needs to be removed. He needs to get out of there. I really don't think that at all. But I do think if you want to make his life easier and have Kirksey, if he's ready to go, come out on the field in certain sets to help bear down on the run if need be, then it's not a bad thing. So that's my thoughts on rushing defense. But gentlemen, any final thoughts on just this matchup as a whole? Anything you still want to see or haven't gotten to say yet? And Stokes, I'll start with you. We'll go back to David.
I think we didn't talk a whole lot about Ken Dorsey. I think that throughout the week I saw a lot of fans complaining that Ken Dorsey was the reason that Josh Allen threw the interceptions that he threw. And when you look at a whole bunch of the plays, it's like Dorsey schemes multiple people open on these plays. So if he's scheming them open and Josh Allen decides to throw it somewhere else, that's not necessarily a Ken Dorsey issue. What is a Ken Dorsey issue is if we have a first down and 10 run that goes for 1 yard, he'll just pass for the next 8 plays. It's like, okay, well, we're done running the ball now, so we're gonna pass and Josh Allen win this game. So that I can accept an issue with Ken Dorsey, but when he's scheming people open and the guy executing the play doesn't execute the play as designed, well, it could be by design, but he's just not taking the easy profit. That's not a Dorsey issue. That's a quarterback issue. And whether it's a disconnect or whether it's just a matter of he is not seeing the field the same way Dorsey is, that's where we have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. David, welcome back.
It's a very brief disconnect. It's fine. Yeah, I think that, for all the talk this offseason, and now unfortunately kind of bleeding into this week with Stephon Diggs, he still had a very typical Stephon Diggs type of game. If anything, it was even better because he went against one of the best corners in the NFL and kind of cooked him, if we're being honest here. And I expect more of that from Diggs. I think you're going to see a lot of Diggs. I think you'll see a lot more. I think you'll just see a better Bills offense from this game, period. I think you'll see them create more explosive plays. I think you'll see them be a little bit more consistent. You'll still see Diggs getting the targets and the plays that he gets, but you'll also get more Davis. You'll get more Kincaid. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward more to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a few things. So when it came to Ken Dorsey, that was a great point too, because I do worry about his kind of shying away of the run, especially when you've put all this confidence in Cook and you've gotten these 2 other running backs. I think it's not so much getting away, but using the run effectively and knowing the time and place for certain styles of runs. So again, we had a lot of people complain about where he was kind of shooting Cook on some of these runs where it was kind of directly at the interior when it was better to just have him go outside, and he had way more success running outside zone. Let him do that. Have Cook be your primary outside back, or if the gaps are open, obviously, if you can scheme something up to give him more success, let's do it, because the Raiders line is not the Jets line. But also on a 2nd and 3rd or a 3rd and 4th or whatever it may be, like, let's see some more of Latavius Murray and Damian Harris. And I'm not saying lean on them primarily, because I don't think that's what they were brought in for. I think they're situational backs, but those are the perfect opportunities to put them on the field and give them a shot to kind of run up the middle and be more authoritative when you get them into the B gap or C gap or A gap or wherever you want to line them up. Like, that's where I kind of see the opportunity for the Bills offense to become more difficult to defend, because they don't have to. And I'm not saying it's not because Cook isn't good. I think Cook's a very good back who's going to blossom into something great this year. But there's the opportunity to let Damian Harris and Latavius Murray just show what they have and be physical and kind of, again, what I think this offense is going to be predicated on, which is just moving and getting yards with the ball in your hands. Latavius Murray and Damian Harris are capable of doing that. Let's see a little more of them, not just in the goal line, but in these short chain situations. I think that might lend itself to be very beneficial to this offense and make you a touch more unpredictable. And David, Stephon Diggs is going to have a big game, because Stephon Diggs is who he is, right? Like, he's just a great receiver. He can get open on anybody. Sauce Gardner, I think, is a fantastic corner. He was still getting open and getting catches, even when the separation, I think it was averaging like 1.4 yards per route. So it's not like he was wide open, but he was still making plays. I would really like to see them. And even though this is kind of counterproductive, not counterproductive, like countering what I've said in the past, but I want to see Diggs in the slot more. And I want to see Knox and Kincaid in the boundary more, because I just think that's mean. Like, I think it's a fun experiment to like let Diggs draw linebackers, specifically a good one like Diablo, off and maybe have this open up where if you want him to kind of have this option route, if you want one of your tight ends to have it even, and have someone kind of come across the middle of the field where that space is vacated, I think you could really get damaging with that. And it could be a lot of fun. And again, if you are giving a ball to Knox or Kincaid in open space and they have green grass in front of them, you're turning what could be like a 5-yard game from maybe a more like weaker receiver into something that could be like 10 or 15 yards because they're just harder to bring down. So I want to see that. But Ken Dorsey, this is my request to you. And I have a request for Josh Allen as well. I want to save the very best for last because I'm about to go off. But I want to see more motion, dude. I want to see more motion. I want to see you try and get people out of space pre-snap. Like, you did it a few times, but I need more of it. I think you have Deontay Hardy, who's the speedster. I think you're seeing a trend around the league, especially stemming from Miami, who has the fastest receiver in the league and one of the best to boot. But use more motion and use more sudden motion. And let's see you get people out of position and make this defense uncomfortable and not sit in their base and think they know what's coming. And like, yeah, you can still have success that way, but let me see you try to get a little more tricky, because there's this opportunity with Deontay Hardy to really cause havoc in the middle of the field, even with just his presence alone and his speed alone. So let me see more of that. And lastly for me, Josh Allen, buddy, pal, friend. I'm sorry I'm ranting, guys, but I had to do this because I've been fuming about this all week. Okay, I'm gonna do what McDermott did. You ready? I am not an NFL quarterback. I'm not. So I'm not smarter than Josh Allen, right? I'm a dumb person. But when it comes to Monday night versus tomorrow, I beg you, and I try not to get too animated on this show, but I'm getting animated on this show. I beg you to just be patient, okay? Let the opportunities come. Do not force the opportunities. If you see pre-snap that a safety is sitting back, and that you don't have to throw a ball to a double covered Deontay Hardy or Stephon Diggs over the middle of the field, don't do it. If you see that near the line, you have a tight end that is open against a linebacker, against the slot corner, whoever it may be for the Raiders, give him the ball. Give him an opportunity. Be more efficient. Understand that if you want to set the table on early downs, you have to be a part of that and be smarter with your pocket presence. Don't bail on clean pockets and take what is given to you, because I promise you, the Raiders played a lot of too high last week. They are going to sit back and wait for you to make a mistake. Defenses are sitting back, waiting for you to make a mistake. Don't feed into it. Make them understand that you are patient, mature in the pocket, carving them up effectively. I have seen you do it before, and I want to see you do it again. Be mindful of the coverage. Understand that it doesn't have to be a home run every single time. Play a methodical game, and then you will earn your keep and maybe get some of those explosive plays later. Okay. I'm cooling down. We have a couple minutes left, guys. David, Stokes, any final thoughts on the Bills versus Raiders tomorrow?
I'm expecting a Bills win, and a pretty convincing one at that. I think that they'll start to course correct a little bit. You got this, you've got the Commanders in the following week before you have to go against the Dolphins in week 4. And the Dolphins obviously have their own big matchup in week 2 against the Patriots. And that's going to be a very, very interesting matchup to see what the Belichick's will do against Mike McDaniel and his offense, given how explosive they were in week 1. So, this could be a really interesting lead up to that particular matchup in week 4. But in order to get there, in order to get that interest and intrigue, you got to take care of business in week 2. And I think the Bills will be able to do that.
What about you, Stokes? What are your final thoughts today?
Yeah, I think this is most definitely a get right position for the Bills. I'm expecting that. I think that the beginning of the game is going to get a little nervy, but as the game wears on, the Bills are going to run away with this. I can see it being either a tie game or a 3-point game at half, and then the Bills are going to win by 17 or more. I think that this is a prime position home opener. Like they're going to be feeling it, and like I said, the only question that I have is whether Josh is going to do what he needs to do to try to keep the ball moving rather than just trying to be hard-headed. And I'm expecting that that's going to be the case, whether it's by Dorsey or Josh Allen's hand. It's going to be a great game. And next week when you're doing this, you're going to be like, okay.
Serenity now. Serenity now. I do have a final thought. A couple final thoughts, actually. The first one, I'll let Aaron and Greg take care of.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Become one today. The link is in the description below. I had to sneak that one in there. No, my real final thoughts for this game. So I'm very excited to watch the Bills pass rush. I think it was fantastic last week. I think even with Zach Wilson in the pocket, you saw prior to that Leonard Floyd, Greg Rousseau were hitting home. I am expecting big games from that defensive line. I'm really, really excited to watch Gregory Rousseau blossom into something amazing this season. He has insane length. He's able to make plays on the ball, even at a distance. He has a formidable pass rush presence that I'm excited to watch. Spencer Brown, on the flip side, I want to see you better against bull rushes and prove that you can anchor the right side of that line more effectively. Again, Max Crosby is a tall ask, but I think that week one is too premature to make anyone in or out on you. I need to see more from him. I think the Bills offense might try to mitigate some of that woe with some quick attacks, but when the time comes where they want to air something out, hold it down. And if you can't hold it down, let's figure something out where maybe the buddy next to you who's very large could also help you hold it down. But guys, I'm excited for tomorrow's game. I'm rooting for a win. I really, really hope that the Bills come more, composed, more poised game of football, that Ken Dorsey kind of learns from his, past mistakes against teams that kind of sit in that too high look, maybe some more motion. Again, I think it was RJ who said more play action. There's a lot more that I want to see from this team this week, but I do think they can get it done. This is an opportunity, and I expect the Bills to win, and I expect them to win big. So, gentlemen, David, I'll start with you. You got anything you want to plug before we sign off for the day?
Well, normally you can find me on Monday nights at 7 o'clock doing the Cover One Roundup with Uber Hansen. But this Monday, you'll have the very fortunate ability to see Joe DeRosa here filling in for me while I am out doing other things. You can also find me at DFoxy or at DFAUXY on Twitter. You'll find a whole bunch of emotional takes during games and some not so emotional takes afterwards. And you can also find me doing a post-game article recap after each game. I try to parse out my thoughts in a more rational way once everything is all wrapped up and done at that point. So that's where you can typically find me.
Very nice, man. I'm excited to sit in on that show too. I love working with Uber, and you guys do a great job. So I'll try to at least give half the talent that you guys perform on that show each week. Stokes, what about you, man?
I'm on Twitter or X at Stokes36. I don't tweet a whole lot, so you won't find any emotional Bills takes from me during the game on there. But I retweet quite a few things, and I'm on the Building Buffalo tailgate, so I'll be doing that tomorrow morning before the game. And yeah, that's it. It's been a wonderful time on here with you guys. It's been great.
Happy to have you on here, man. David Stokes, thank you both so much for being here today. This was a really fun episode. Bills fans, listen, we had a brutal week 1. I understand that. Given that and a lot of other things that have come out this week, the atmosphere is very negative. But my request to anyone going to that game tomorrow is good vibes. Let's let our team feed off the energy. Let's get amped. Let's show everyone that it's just 1 week and we could turn the page quickly on it. And that includes you, Josh Allen. But my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. Shout out to you, Pops Mafia, for figuring out my pun in my headline, by the way. I was really hoping someone would catch it, and I glad someone did. Heather Smith here says, Bills 31-10, go Bills. Heather, I am hoping that is the final result. I think everyone can agree with me when I say the Bills need an absolute laugher. They need a blowout. They need something that just reignites the optimism in this fan base because it seems to have gone away. And there's one final comment that I want to pull up because I saw this earlier. This guy commented on the show. I bookmarked it because I wanted to bring it up. So I am not letting you get away with jinxing the team this week, Mr. Humble Bills fan. Okay. This is too humble. All right. They are not screwed. It's very early in the year. I know things look bleak because of last week. Important to remember the context of that game. As I have said, even with my rants this episode, the Jets are a great defense and they play the Bills really well. And they did it in MetLife last year and they did it in MetLife again this year with the same quarterback at the helm. It happens. Week 1 is an ugly week, but it's also a liar, according to Aaron Quinn, which I agree with. So please, the Bills are not screwed. I will not buy into this negativity. I believe that they are going to be fine. I am going to stay positive instead. But everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. If you like what you heard, if you like what you watched, please do cover one a favor and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Subscribe to the premium pass that is in the description below. You get access to some fantastic content as well as constant Bills discussion in the premium Slack channel, which is a blast to be a part of. It's really always going on. But there's also some other really cool features in there, including film breakdowns and some other little tidbits that I'll let you find out for yourself. But an announcement to make this week, everybody. I am going to be at my sister's wedding next weekend, which means I will not be doing a live show next Saturday. I'm going to be officiating this wedding, which I am very excited for. But I do plan on trying to get a pre-recorded show out for all of you this week. I am working out the details to make sure that this happens because I have to do a lot of traveling, so it's about time frame. But I am going to try my hardest to make sure that there is still some content for you to enjoy this upcoming Saturday. And if anything on that note changes, I will let you all know on my Twitter, as well as make sure that the announcement is spread so we can figure something out. But to everyone in the chat, thank you so much for joining us today and for all of your amazing contributions. I had a great time. Let's try to take a deep breath and hope that the Bills can come out of the gates hot and win this one big tomorrow. For James Stokes, for David Fox, for me, Joe DeRosa, I'd like to say thank you. Happy Saturday. And as always, go Bills.